This video, I'm going to dive into what happens if you were to buy one of my BankManager Pluses. What comes in the box, how to assemble it, how to hook it up in your system and make it work for you. And in this episode of What to Do with a BBMS, I'm going to talk about what happens from when you get the box until it's installed on your boat. Well, this is the stuff that'll come from us. You're going to get a box, you're going to get the stainless steel fasteners to hook it all together. You're going to get the magic board itself. This little device, which is called a rotary actuator, rotary encoder, and it's a little switch you can push and turn, knob for it. This little thing, which is really neat, I love these things. I just kind of discovered them. They're OLEDs. They're LEDs that are organic, and they are bright and clean and crisp, and lots of resolution. The wires to hook those things to the motherboard, and this, which is the current sensor. And this is a Hall effect sensor. Your main current line will end up going through it. It clamps right over the top, so you can put it on after. And it picks up the minute magnetic field that makes and turns it into information that I can use to fairly accurately actually pick up the amp reading. Okay, time to assemble this. First thing I would do is grab the wires and plug them into the devices. The wires that have 5 go into the encoder. If you look at the encoder, it's ground plus SW, DT, CLK. Just choose a color that makes sense to you and put them together. I went green with ground. Your colors will change. In fact, I just decided I want to go the other way. So I'm going to turn it over because I like brown for ground and then red on the DC positive. It's very unimportant, they're just wires. And for the OLED, I'm going to put black on ground and all the wires in order. There we go. Having the wires on at this stage, got to put them on sometime. Just gives you like a little handle to do the next steps. Okay, the OLED has this little tear-off protective strip. Now's the time to get rid of it. You don't want to glue this together and leave the strip on because you'll be looking at a cloudy world for the rest of ever. And it's time to install the OLED. The OLED, if you look at it, there's this glass section of this glass screen, and then just inboard little, I'm sure you can't see it on camera, but you'll see it when you get your own, is like a frame, kind of like a laptop. And inside that frame, it's just slightly different color, and that's the actual display area. Trick is you want to take the display area and get it lined up very nicely with the cutout and have it all nice and square. When you put this all together, the OLED is going to be over on the side that has the terminals, and if you want to install it this way, you want to make sure you've got the OLED up, wires down, other end is up, or your characters will all be upside down. Now, if you're going to install this whole thing with your wires going out the top of the box, then, make the appropriate adjustments. It's nice that you get to set this up yourself so you get a little more flexibility. But honestly, the reason why I'm making you put the OLED into the lid is because of manufacturing. I can't find anybody along the stage to do this. I can get people to put things in boxes, but not this step. Okay, you need a hot glue gun. And this is like easy as anything. Just put some hot glue in the corner and let it cool. Now, hot glue is really great stuff. They use it in electronics all the time. If you watch AVE videos, he calls it hot snot, which is all fun and everything, but it's like an industry standard. Everything you own electronics, if you look through it, you'll find that there is this white glue. Now, for a little while, it stays hot, especially when you got it on plastic parts like this. So I'm having to hold it all lined up right now. I just did a couple of them. But you'll want to do all 4 corners. And if you get it out of whack, and you need to get it out again, once it's all hard, it's pretty strong. But you grab some isopropyl alcohol and put that on it, It won't hurt the electronics, but I wouldn't get it on the screen, just on the hot glue. And just let it sit there for, I don't know, 10 seconds or so. And then just a little bit of a pry with a screwdriver and it'll pop right off. So I guess that means don't submerge your device in isopropyl alcohol later on. Probably work with ethanol too, so don't spill vodka on the device. And that's it. That's glued in there. Now, for the encoder, there is no right side up to an encoder. Encoder just goes around and around and around forever, and it has a little push button action. But other than that, it's not like there's a 12 o'clock means half volume or anything like that. It's just left and right. If there's two styles that I have, and I can't tell you which one you're going to get. One is this one, and it's got a threaded shaft, and it comes with a nut and a washer. It comes with this little pin as well, and I find this pin kind of annoying. You could either put a little notch in the case to hold the pin. The idea of the pin is so that the whole thing can't rotate, or you could just bend the pin out of the way or nip it off. I'll just give this little bend, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. With the pin out of the way, it falls right into the hole. You just line it up, get it in there, get it so there's room for the wire, which basically means the wire goes over top of the other one. Drop the washer, drop the nut, screw it down, use a little wrench, get it good and tight, and it won't go anywhere. Now, if you get it all together, where the OLED, you want to get nice and square. If this thing ends up being, 20 degrees out, it matters nothing at all. It's the same knob. And when you're done, never can find it when you want it. Grab the knob, line it up, and push it on. And that's it. There's the whole lid done. Now, if you have the version that doesn't have the threaded rod and everything, it's even easier. You just put a little bit of hot glue on it, put it in the hole, hold it until it's nice and hard, and then you're done. Same deal as the other one. Okay, lid's now done. That's the hardest part of this whole job. Okay, the order of installation of the rest of it is completely up to you. This particular box doesn't have holes in it just because I haven't drilled the holes, but they'll come from the factory. They'll come in the kit with some holes down the edge, and you want to drop it in so that the holes line up with these terminals for obvious reasons. This is how it wires to the outside world. Probably the easiest thing to do now is to screw this right into the box. For this, you'll use the little short 1/4-inch screws, and just every corner gets a screw. If you're impatient, 4 screws is overkill, but 2 will work. The other 1/2-inch screws, the longer screws, they're going to be in the next step. Put the lid on. Okay, so here we go. Now take the 4 wires that came from the OLED and plug them into the OLED 4 strip. And it's all labeled on the board very plainly. Each pin has a label, and so doesn't the group of pins labeled OLED. So put these on. I did say black for ground, didn't I? Okay. Yeah, that's the other one. Okay, so I put these in here. It's hard to show you, but all I'm doing is, pushing little terminals on pins. There we go. Now, these come off, these little headers they're called, they come off at 90 degrees. And I've installed them a little crooked so they go up a little on purpose. But if I don't get them high enough and your particular box makes it hard to put one in, feel free to bend these little pins up. Just grab them individually and pull them up a little bit, and they'll bend very easily. They're good and stout and tough little devices. Same deal with the rotary encoder. The one that's ground is the first one, and go right down the line and just plug them together. Okay, that's the whole thing installed. So we've got 5 wires going to the 5-pin, the encoder, and we've got the 4-wire group going to the 4 pins, the OLED. Make sure that you can move the wires around and close the lid, of course. And the only trick for that is just make sure the wires aren't on top of this terminal strip. But this would be the finished product, and you can put screws in it, and there you go. But we're going to need to get inside to do the next step. Okay, the next step is wiring it up to your boat. Now it's time to install it on the boat. You need a few more parts for this. You're going to grab this thing, of course, and we're going to hook that up in just a minute. This is the sensor, and it senses the current that flows in and out of the lithium batteries. And you're going to need a contactor. So I've got a few here I want to talk about so we get the idea. What contactors are is just for switches that can be controlled by the device. But they're big switches. I mean, look at this one. Looks just like an automotive relay. It is. But it's rated for 200 amps. It's 200 Chinese amps, so I don't know if it would go right to the limit, but it's pretty simple. All of them are basically the same thing. It's just a switch. I can send signals from the device that tells the switch to actuate, and then when the switch is together, current can flow in and out of your lithium, and when it's separated, current can't flow to your lithium. That's all we need here. You'll have to choose what kind you want, what's right for your application. So let me just show you some examples. This guy here, I got on eBay for about 20 bucks. And honestly, I didn't expect much from it, but it's a nice little relay. It says it's rated for 200 amps, and I've taken it apart and looked at it. I don't think it's good for 200 amps, but that's a lot. So you probably don't, if you don't need 200, if your boat is really more of a solar and, maybe running the fridge, this might be all you need. This particular one is what's called a normally open relay. Let me talk about that because it's important for your decision process. Normally open relay is right now with no signal, the connection is open, the switch is off. Nice thing about an normally open relay in this application is if you were just shutting down my device or my device failed miserably or whatever, the resting state would be disconnected, and disconnected is always safe. So that's why you might choose a normally open relay. Why you wouldn't choose a normally open relay is when you have it connected, it costs you a tiny bit of power. It's not a huge amount, but there is current that has to constantly go through this normally open type relay all the time. And that would be during the times when the lithium and lead are connected, which is all night. You have no charging going on. And during the charge part, where you actually want all the power to go in the battery. The only time you wouldn't be applying power is when the lithium is fully charged. So it's kind of backwards of the world you'd want. When you have all the power in the world and you don't care anymore is when it takes a rest. But like I said, it's got a certain amount of safety to it. That's a way to go. My system can handle normally open relays. This guy is a step up in quality, but I'm going to talk about him because he's a normally closed relay. First off, this particular one's only 150 amp rated, but I bet it could handle as much as this could really handle. It's a normally closed relay, which means in its resting state right now, that's actually together. And when I apply power, it opens up. Well, that's kind of cool. Maybe not from the safety if something goes wrong point of view, but it's closed using absolutely no power while you're using power all night and during the day when you're charging up your lithium. And then when you have plenty of power in the system and it's just being kind of wasted or topping off the lead, that's when it uses a little power. Now the little power on this particular unit is very, very low. When you choose, there's a word called economizers, and this has what's called an economizer built in. And the short of that is it has some circuitry in here that uses a fairly big chunk of power to make the connection, and then it backs off and just uses a little trickle to hold it there. But that's a choice. This is the third style. It doesn't have to look like this. I know this one looks weird. I'll get to that in a minute. But this is what's called a bistable relay. And a bistable relay is not normally open. It is not normally closed. I send it one signal to say close. And now it's closed. If I took power away, it would just stay closed forever. A little later, when I want to change states, I send for a little bit of time another signal that says open up. And now it's an open circuit, and it would stay open forever. So safety-wise or whatever, you kind of don't know. It's going to be in whatever the last state is. But power-wise, this is the winner. It uses no power to speak of because for 150 milliseconds, I gave it some juice and then none. I actually like these best, but that's your personal decision. Now, this particular one, it's a Fujitsu. I've run the boat with it. I like it, and there's a lot of things I like about this more than any other one. I think this one's rated at 200 amps. Oh, it's a nice performer. Problem is, I had to solder wires onto these individual little things to control it, and that would be something you have to do yourself. What it's designed for is you make a custom circuit board that would go onto here, and in our case, it'd probably be a little power strip, terminal strip with the screw terminals. But if you have to solve that problem yourself. And then the other weirdness is this is automotive, and these aren't like big old nice threaded terminals like we like to see on boats. So you have to put a bolt through here and deal with that. Now the final one to talk about is what I actually chose to use on the Temptress. And I'm too lazy to disinstall it, so you'll see video on it. It looks kind of like this, nice big terminals, actually huge terminals, 3/8 terminals. It's rated at 300 amps, which I don't think many of you will need more than 300. If you do, you've got to find your own contactor. But this particular system can handle any size. It's just how big the contactor is. I have this going real soon into a 48-volt system for a hotel that runs air conditioners all off solar, 20,000 watts of solar. And he's going to put a bigger contactor in, but he'll be using the same BBMS to control the system. So this contactor is a bistable. I apply power to go one way, and I apply a different set of power, a different signal to go the other way. I think that's the best personally. It uses very little power. It's really, really well made. The problem with the one I bought is industry does something in one way. It involves flyback diodes. I won't go into it. But the only ones you can buy are backwards. I bought this as backwards, so I had to disassemble it and change some things around and put it back together. I wouldn't want you to have to go through this, and if you get them backwards, it would be very bad. So I've made a contact with the company who produces these, and they're going to produce some for me. So if you want them, you can buy them through me, and there'll just be no thought involved. Just take it, install it. But if you have any other kind of contactor that you like, feel free. My system will work, like I said, with normally closed, normally open, or bistable relays. Just make sure the amps are high enough for your need, and make sure that the power they need is within reason. A couple amps, not like, if it used 6 amps all the time, first off, you don't want it because it's wasting a lot of power. But second off, it would get hot eventually. This device wouldn't be able to continually handle a big deal. Usually these things are in milliamps. I think this is like 300 milliamps. It can handle that all day. Okay, how to actually hook it up. Well, starting at this end, and they're all labeled here, you've got PB. PB will go to your lead positive. PB, the element lead, PB. The next one, Li. Li will go to the positive of your lithium. Then there are a pair of terminals labeled off and on. If you're using a bistable relay, you can connect the off switch, as it were, to off, and the terminal that makes it turn on to on. If you're using a normally open relay, you just take the, think of this normally open as when you apply power, it goes on. So take the actuation line from that and run it to on. If you're using a normally closed relay, it's normally in an on mode and you apply power to make it go off. So take its action line from there and run it to the off terminal. So for a monostable, you're only going to use one of the two of these. Then the next one is ground. All the grounds for everything go to that. It'll go to your battery ground, and it'll go to the ground for your little sensor, which is what all the rest are for. So these 4 terminals are all having to do with the sensor. Starting from the other end, I've got +5, and that will go to your 5 volts. That goes into here. The ground goes to 0 volts. The other two are labeled low C and high C. Those are the low voltage for current and the high voltage for current. Unimportant to know the details of that, just what you have to remember is low C goes to this device where it says VREF, pin number 4. And high C goes to where it says pin number 3, V out. And this will all be in the manual, of course. Hook all those together and you have a working system. You'll have to supply wiring, of course. I don't know how long your application is, you know, your mileage will vary on this. You just have to do it the way you do it. But let me talk about the wire to choose. Now, all of these probably should be 14 or 16 gauge wire because it's what fits into the little terminals. They'll all work with most any wire. They're very flexible. Barring the ground. For the ground, you can't use little dental floss wire. You've got to use wire of some substance. Again, 14 or 16 gauge. The run should be relatively short. It shouldn't run 8 miles to a bigger wire. It's going to go to your battery's ground system. And if you have to make it run a long way to pick up the ground you want, just switch to 12 gauge wire as soon as you get out of the case. The wires for the sensor are a little different. There's 4 of them. You could use most any wire you want if it's a short run. If it's a longer run, or more importantly, if that wire has to run parallel to some big current carrying wires, which is likely because, you know, it's going to be near the current, you might want to use a step up in wire. The 2 wires that have to do with C, the high C and the low C, in the best of worlds, they should be twisted around each other all the way through the length of the wire. It's called twisted pair, and they should have a shield around them. The other 2 wires are what carries power to it. They're way more flexible, and it just doesn't matter if they're twisted, but they don't have to be. And if you have a shielded wire, you want to run the shield to the ground wire that goes into the box here. The other side, you just let the shield float. Now I found this wire, I just happen to have it on Temptress from some earlier project, and it's just ideal. There's a foil shield around the twisted pair, and they're twisted, and it has these other 2 terminals, but this is probably overkill. Okay, so this is the ideal wire for this application. Back to this, pretty straightforward. The red wire in my case goes to the +5, goes off to the device. The ground is shared with all the other grounds, and you can do that outside of the box too, you know, bring them all together outside the box. And then the other 2, the twisted pair, go to the other 2 terminals. I'm going to wire this all up now on the test bench here. I'm going to hook it up to little batteries so we can power this up and see how it will react in the system. But for the final installation, here's what it looks like on Temptress. Again, apologize for my messy wiring. Remember, this is a work in progress. I take this thing out and put it in a lot of times, making small changes. So this isn't like how you would install it where everything is pristine and nice, if that's your style. But it's how I do it here. So that's how you wire up a BankManager Plus. If you are doing the same process with just the regular BankManager, it's exactly the same except for deletions. The lid has no holes, there are no controls, all of these wires go away, and there will be no wires running to the sensor because it doesn't have a sensor. Bye from Temptress.